So the question that we're asking here, and the question that we're answering rather, is a super interesting one, and it's about for anyone who hasn't been following along or who hasn't been paying attention. So the question is, I want to use a merge field, and there are date merge fields that allow me to merge in the current day of the week. But if the rest of my email is in Spanish, then you can't really use that merge field because the merge field doesn't adopt the language of the email. It just merges in English. So I saw this question and I kind of glossed over it because nothing immediately popped for me. So I want to give a lot of credit to Rorik here, who had a really creative solution for how you could dynamically set the day of the week in a custom field and then use that as your current day of the week if you needed to merge in like have a nice Friday or have a nice Saturday or whatever the current day of the week was. So I saw his video and it handles it fairly elegantly. I was impressed at the creativity for coming up with that. So kudos, Rorik. But the reason I'm recording this is just because I think I can make it a little bit cleaner. I think I can streamline it a little bit, and I wanted to share that with you guys. So, all right, so here's the campaign that Rorik built. For anyone who has ever used the looping campaign, you can see that it starts with a tag, International Day of Week Trigger tag, and then we've got 14 different sequences, and it finishes with the same tag. So there are 2 sequences for each day of the week. So on the initial pass through, on the first time they go through this, they're going to go into all of these sequences marked initial. So the 7 different sequences that are marked initial, they'll go into all of those because it is their first time through this. Now, in each of those sequences, we have the first step just running immediately. So as long as it's that day of the week, there's no delay other than waiting until that day. So we have one for Sunday, and then we have a different sequence for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, all the way down to Saturday. And the first thing that happens is we are applying a tag indicating that they are now active in this sequence. So that tag is important because it prevents them from going into this sequence again. After their initial pass through, after they go into these initial sequences, the second time they come through, the second time they loop through this whole process, they're going to go into the repeat sequences. So the second set of 7 sequences that is marked repeat, that's for their second and third and fourth and any time after their first. And here's the reason why. That first step is going to go immediately, and then we're going to set the field to the day of the week. But that's only going to run if they pass through on a Sunday or on a Monday or on a Tuesday. So it's going to set it to whatever the current day of the week is. So you could see on a Sunday, right? If this runs on a Sunday, it sets this to a Sunday as well. And then a minute later, it's going to remove that initial trigger tag. So International Day of Week Trigger. That's the same tag that started this campaign. It's going to remove it. And the reason we're removing it is so that we can reapply it. So when you do a looping campaign like this, the same tag that triggers it needs to be removed in all of these sequences so that it can be reapplied. And the second application of that tag is actually what causes that trigger. So all of that's really well and good. Now, the second time they come through, they're going to go into all of these repeat sequences, right? And the difference is on the repeat sequence, it's waiting until midnight on the day of to set that field value. So the second time it comes around, right, because it's going to loop after 2 minutes, then it's going to wait until whatever the next midnight is. So if it's Sunday at midnight, this one will run. If it's Monday at midnight, this one will run. If it's Tuesday at midnight, this one will run. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So all 7 of those sequences will start at the same time, but whichever midnight happens next, that is what's going to update the field. And the reason that's important is because using that logic, you can use the day of the week, the International Day of the Week merge field in any of your emails because this process is going to keep it current, right? So I love where we're at here. And it was right around this time that Rorik suggested, hey, you have to also have an exit strategy. So you need like a release hatch, I think he called it, where if that tag gets applied, it pulls them out of any of these sequences and stops the whole process, right? And you do need that, and I think that's a good idea. But I wouldn't suggest making it an extra goal, right? If this is the setup you're going for, you could save yourself this hassle and this spider web by just adding the release hatch, right, as part of what this goal is looking for. So release hatch, and we'll just click create, and we'll call this test tag, okay? So the reason I emphasize that is because that tag will pull them out, and you don't need to duplicate all of your lines. You can use the same goal to listen for more than one tag, and it's not going to restart them because it's not the same tag. The release hatch tag is a conclusion goal here, but it's not also a trigger goal. So let's look at this a little bit deeper here. So there are 14 different sequences, and I started asking Rorik, I said, hey, why do we need all 14 of these? And we started talking about the logic behind that. And here's what I think we can do. So this first sequence is going to process in a total of 2 minutes. So it starts, whatever day of the week it happens to be, and then it stops. A minute later, it removes the tag, and a minute later, it applies the tag. So it's only going to be 2 minutes long. And the reason we have that second sequence is because we don't want them to just go through and 2 minutes later cycle through and then go through and then 2 minutes later cycle through. It would just be an unnecessary use of your system's bandwidth, right? It's a lot of actions processing. You really only need it to cycle once a day. And I think what we can do is just change this last step. Instead of run at any time, we can have it run, at 12 a.m. So 12 a.m., which is midnight, right? So we know that it's going to run at the next midnight. So it waits until Sunday at any time, and then it removes this tag, and then at midnight, it applies that. So what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that this whole process only runs once a day. So once we've done that, we can actually remove all of the repeat sequences. We don't need anything other than the initial sequence, because at this point they're only going to run once a day, so it's no problem if they cycle into the same sequences. So I like that because it makes this campaign configuration a little bit more manageable. 14 different sequences kind of just becomes a little bit difficult to make sure that you don't have anything overlapping, or you don't have any concurrent processes that are redundant. So I'm a big fan of, whenever you can, trimming it down just like this. Now, what we would have to do for this to work is go into each of the other sequences and change that. Instead of 1 minute, we could do no delay, and then run at any day at and 12 a.m. And I would go through and do the same thing for the other sequences here. So I think that's a good step. And to streamline it a little bit further, that would mean we no longer need this tag. Okay, so we can remove that tag altogether. And we also don't need this timer. So the 1 minute delay there isn't necessary anymore, because what we're doing is removing that tag at the exact same time that the field value is set, and then at midnight we're running that one. So again, I would go through each of these remaining 7 sequences and remove that initial tag, and then also remove this timer to make sure that we don't need that extra 1 minute. It's not doing us any good there. As long as these processes don't process right in tandem, it should work, without exception every time. So that to me is a good step in the right direction. That's probably the next version here. And I just used the word version, and I think this goes back to a really important lesson that the ICP trainers, both Matt and Rorik, would agree, and I think they even use or reference. Version 1 is better than version none, right? And launching your campaign, getting it out there is the goal. But if you don't go back to it like we're doing here, then you may be missing some really good opportunities for refining it, for streamlining it, for optimizing it. I'm kind of picking on Rorik here because this was initially his campaign that inspired this, but I do this for my own campaigns as well, where I go back over them after a couple months or a couple years, and I just figure out things that can make it more efficient that I missed at the beginning. So this is not a criticism of where Rorik was at. It's just that oftentimes, if you go back to the same project with a different lens, you're going to find areas that you can improve it. For example, I think we can make this a little bit cleaner even still. So I think we can delete all of these. We don't need a decision diamond at all. I think what we can do is, just use one sequence. Here we go, and we'll call this set day of week. Okay, and right there. And then we just need to clone within the sequence. We need to duplicate this part. Okay, so there's no reason that I see that we couldn't have these be running on the same, sequence, the same schedule here, because we could use a one sequence to just funnel people through. And one day it's going to set it to Sunday, and then on Monday it's going to set it to Monday, and then we're going to remove that tag, and we're going to reapply that tag, and that's going to loop them through again, and the next day it's going to run again. And remember, this part here is preventing it from running more than once, so we just need to duplicate again and drag this down. And this time it would be Tuesday instead of Monday. And we would update this set field value here so that it's listening for Tuesday, and then set the other items as ready. And I'm gonna pause for a moment while I go through and do the next few of these. There's no reason for you to have to watch while I update the remaining days of the week, but just know that the process would be the same. You would do the same thing for each day of the week and update it so that they only run one at a time. Okay. Okay, so what we have here is a finished sequence with all 7 days of the week, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all the way through Friday. And each day of the week, it's going to run at any time. So if they enter this sequence and they're going to queue up on each of these, it's going to, if it's that day of the week, whichever day of the week it is, it'll update that field with the current day of the week. And then it will immediately remove the loop tag. And then at midnight, which will be, of course, the start of the next day, it's going to apply that same tag, pull them out of the sequence, add them back in, and whichever one was next will continue to fire off, for whatever the next day of the week is. So they're going to cycle through this once a day, right? Each day of the week, this tag will be applied, and then it'll be re-triggered, and then it'll be removed, and then it'll be reapplied, and that same process will repeat over and over again, updating that field each day. So that's going to work, and I feel like this is definitely a little bit cleaner. It's requiring less of your system, but let's do one more change and make this a little bit more refined as well. So I believe we can remove each of these. So I believe that we can remove, actually, I think we can remove all of these. So delete this, delete that, because we only need this to loop once a week. So, if they enter on a Sunday, right, it's going to set this value, it's going to remove that tag, it's going to pull them out, and then when they enter on a Monday, it's going to update to this one. When they enter on a Tuesday, it's going to update till Tuesday, and then on a Wednesday till Wednesday, Thursday it'll update till Thursday, Friday to Friday, and then, actually this should be Saturday here. So it will change dynamically each day of the week if they stay in here, and then on Sunday, it's going to process them through again. And then the whole process starts over. So I believe we can cut down on the number of times that this contact has to loop just by doing this remove and apply process once a week. Just a quick update here. So Keap has introduced a add to sequence widget that you could potentially use instead of tags. So right now, tags have been the way that we loop this whole process. But you could use the add to sequence widget to add them to the beginning process and then also remove them from the existing one. But if you were doing that, you would need to have 2 sequences in order to add them to the first one and then remove them from the second one. I don't think it would work if you were just adding and removing them from a singular sequence that they were in. But this could potentially reduce the number of tags you need for this process. So this is my final iteration. So I hope that makes this a little bit cleaner. And for Karen or anyone else who this benefits, obviously you could use the same logic to update to whatever language you wanted for the day of the week, or for the month of the year, or any other variable that you wanted to include there that the native date merge fields don't accommodate for. And for Rorik, I just want to, again, express my appreciation for you starting this dialogue. Your initial video was really clever and inspired where we're at here. Okay, well, the whole takeaway, the whole point of this video is that there is usually room for improvement in any of your processes. I know that's true for mine, and so this is a reminder for me to go back over my existing automation and just comb over it again and see if, the things I know now would inspire me to do something differently. Because obviously anything that you've built is a process of your understanding and your skills and your strengths and your perspective at the time that you built it. So as you evolve, right, it makes sense to go back and ensure that your systems and your automation processes are evolving as well. So anyway, if you have feedback on this, or if you see something I overlooked and some way that we can make this even more efficient, I'd love to hear it, because conversations like this, they're a bunch of fun for me. I love geeking out on this stuff.